place a stone of care and hope for those in our community here and in the larger community who are seeking work in this time. And a stone to acknowledge those joys and concerns that were shared online today. May we hold these joys and concerns in our hearts with one another, with the hope that by sharing our burdens, they are lessened, and by sharing our joys, they are magnified.
Well, good morning. Do you all remember the old story about stone soup? Remember this story? This is the one, it's sort of like, it's not quite a fairy tale, but it's like I don't know, it's a legend. It's not quite a myth, but this is the one where a group of really hungry strangers show up at a village, sleepy, I don't know, in like the Alps or something. And they're really hungry, but they don't have anything to eat. So they go to the village with a stone and say, this is actually a magical stone, and it makes the most delicious soup. If you'd let us stay here in your village, we'll make the magical soup for you. And so the villagers, this is a closed society situation. They're wary of strangers, but they say, okay, you can stay with us as long as you make the soup. So of course they put the stone in the pot and they bring the water and they're like, don't worry, it's happening. It's a magic stone, but it takes some time. So of course, the story continues with the strangers saying, we need some garnishes for this soup. It makes a great broth, but it'd be good if there was some other things in it to make it more delicious. And so of course everyone's like, well, I have some scraps, some things in my kitchen. So maybe people bring some scraps. Then maybe some other people, they have more special things. They bring their special things. And suddenly the pot begins to really become this collaborative meal. This whole group of people has come and brought these things to make something delicious, to make something together. The garnishes are all in, and of course, the soup is delicious. And that's sort of the moral of the story is, of course, the strength of us together, what we can do when we collaborate, the possibilities that can be when we bring our generosity to the fore. For my part, speaking like my inner chef, my inner cooking person speaking, I just really hope that the inner stone had salt in it. Because whenever I hear this story, all I can think is if you put a bunch of vegetables and stuff in a bunch of boiling water, that's going to be gross. That's going to be absolutely awful. The miracle, though, is in the stone itself. The stone is the symbol, right? It's a vision. It's a hopeful vision. There isn't soup yet, but there could be. We could have soup if we wanted. I was thinking about this story this summer because I saw a really surprising, kind of remarkable TikTok that made me think of stone soup. And it was about a woman in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And the thing I'll say is I follow her account because mainly what she does on her TikTok is she looks at inane and weird Wikipedia entries. She's like an archaeologist of Wikipedia, finding strange, unusual things. And one of the things that she found was an entry for what's called perpetual stew. Perpetual stew. My favorite version of a perpetual stew is actually what you find in a noodle shop, especially in a traditional area of the world. A noodle shop will often have what's called a mother broth. And the mother broth is basically a broth that has never not been cooking. It's always cooking. And sometimes these mother broths, they're decades old. Some of them go back before World War II, and they were there's stories about them being saved, some amount of the mother broth sort of being carried through. So it's the idea of a stew or a soup or something that has been cultivated and cared for, tended like a garden for decades and decades and decades. So how do you make a perpetual soup in Brooklyn? In this case, a perpetual stew. Well, you need a stone for your stone soup. And guess what the modern equivalent of the stone in stone soup is? The crock pot. So this woman this became a meme. It really kind of went wide and viral. She created this sort of stone soup where people were running into her in the grocery store. She's buying some things to add to the soup, and they're like, oh, I saw you on TikTok. Can we come by and try some of the stew? And so suddenly she's feeding people in this neighborhood, and it's continuing. Like I said, this is a fairy tale. This isn't supposed to happen. We're not supposed to be able to make stone soup, but here it is in front of us. And to me, that's really the important lesson from this story is not really about the generosity and the sharing, though that is, of course, the form that it takes. But it's this idea of what happens when two forces come together, which is people with resources and the vision of what could be. When those two things come together, that's the symbolic power of the stone soup. So once our intention is set, and as long as we don't lose our faith in what's possible, it's the belief that we can do extraordinary things. If you'd like to chat with me about this after service, during coffee hour, I'll be in the library to talk about maybe moments in our own lives where some kind of culinary experience brought this kind of possibility into our own lives. And now I'd like to invite Chrissy Francisco to introduce our offertory, Willow's Edge Creations.
Hello, I'm Chrissy. I've never been so invested in this chalice before. I told someone I had been studying for weeks, and then last weekend when we had no power, I got to practice, but I didn't know this was going to be my weekend, so I'll be watching. But I've been involved in community theater since about 2019, and I never thought I'd be able to be involved in something that you're about to hear right now. Back in April, I heard an audition notification come across on one of the various ways we get audition notifications, and I almost kept scrolling because the musical was, for starters, a rock opera, not really my thing. Secondly, it was a retelling of a religious story, and I don't particularly believe in that religious story, so I was just like, nah, that's not for me. And then thirdly, even if I was gonna give it a shot, it's mostly men, so it just didn't seem like my show. But something about the casting call caught my eye. It specifically called for all LGBTQ and allied performers who identify as cis, trans, female, or non-binary. So I was like, I'm a cis female, I'm an allied performer. I kept reading. Then it says all ages, cool, all ethnicities, awesome, and all body types. And I'm like, yeah, cool. So I had to check this out. I gave the audition all I had, including a monologue I had learned the night before, and spoiler alert, I was casted. And before I spoil anything more, I'd like to introduce our director, Denise, so she can tell you just how unique of an opportunity I have been granted.
Spoiler alert, I'm Denise. Hi. Thank you for that. And thank you for welcoming me into your church this morning. Willow's Edge Creations. How many people know of the willow tree at Edgewater Park? It's been there. I'm going to say from who knows when, but the willow tree, it brings a lot of people together. It has a lot of stories. It has a lot of lives that have been around it. My co-producer of Jesus Christ Superstar and the co-director with me with Willow's Edge, we've been friends for 25 years. We're performers, we're in theater, we do different things. I also work at the LGBT Community Center. So there's a lot of activism in the art that I do. We came together and we both identify with the story of the tree, of this one landmark in Cleveland that I would not know anyone else in this room, and we would have stories about that tree. We wanted to create something that could bring people together so they could see themselves on stage or in a production where they might not traditionally have been or have seen themselves represented. She has always wanted to do Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar. She never got cast as Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar. I said, sure, I will cast you as Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar. And we said that there were conditions. It needed to tie together the things that were going on in the world today. So we bring you a very dystopian society that takes the things that are happening today, the anti-LGBTQ legislations and policies that are coming out. We have representation with Black Lives Matter. We have women's reproductive rights. Everything that is where many are being affected by rules that are made by few, out of fear and the unknown. They are afraid. We bring together this telling of the story that many people in my community want nothing to do with, because we have been ostracized, we have been marginalized, and so I wanted to say, how could we bring this story of this individual and the people that are being affected today? So there is a line that Judas says in one of his songs, "We are the occupied." And Chrissy wanted me to talk about the occupied. The way that we are doing this is that, yes, we have representation of cis members who are allies in LGBTQ. We have different races. We have people that have not been in theater for 40 years that are now on stage, different body types. We have cis and trans members. The point of this is that we are telling this story of these people who come together because they have to flee. They have to flee for their lives, because it takes where we are now and it takes it to an extreme. People begin disappearing. If you are trans, or you are gay, or you have issues with reproductive rights, you may disappear. You may die if you stay where you are. They leave, they flee, they come together, they mobilize. They begin to create this new culture, this new community. They are called the occupied. As they begin to mobilize and their numbers grow, I love what Alan said about the vision of what can be. You begin to have these people that come together. They have these common causes and these common bonds, and they come together with the what could be vision. But as the numbers grow, things begin to splinter, because alliances change, thoughts on what could be changes, and so it tells the story, instead of taking it and talking about Jesus Christ, what it does is it talks about a person. It talks about a person who other people look to as a leader. And we are flawed humans. Humans are flawed. And so what happens, we try to build something that is this new and enlightened community, but we fall into old patterns. We fall into consumerism. We fall into idol worship, and that person becomes the symbol of all of that. And that's their downfall. But what we also are telling is that there is hope with all of this in a way that you might not have seen before. And really, we want people to come on stage and see themselves, the audience to see themselves reflected, so that you may see yourself and you may see yourself and have representation. Because if you go to see something or a movie or a show, or you're in the world and you don't see yourself reflected, your soul hurts. You're not seen. So that's why we say thank you, and that's why we are doing this show, so people can see themselves and hopefully relate. I talked a lot, so thank you.
Thank you, Denise. We're grateful to be able to support Willow's Edge Creations and this production, and so I invite you to give generously within your means this morning. Thank you.
please join me. We'll sing through twice our acceptance of the gifts. From you I receive. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. Thank you. And I'd like to invite my partner in crime up to join me for our reading. Francisco is going to read Spanish, and I will interpret in English. Come up to the microphone with me. A little closer.
Are we going to read together?
You go and I'll go, one at a time.
Okay, the poem is called Do Not Fear Agitation by Tania Marquez. No temas a las agitaciones, puesto que es el ritmo de la vida misma. Ser puesto en el movimiento, insertarte.
Do not fear agitation, for agitation is the rhythm of life itself, to be put into motion, to be stirred.
No temas los movimientos que descentran lo que crees permanente. Lleves dentro el centro de tu entendimiento, la brújula que te muestra el camino.
Do not fear the movements that decenter what you always thought permanent. You carry within the center of your understanding the compass to show you the way.
Lleva contigo el amor que te sostendrá, la visión que te guiará, las relaciones con todos los seres y el mundo que te pondrá los pies sobre la tierra. Ve en paz y con una suave agitación. Mueve a este mundo hacia el lado del amor.
Carry with you the love that will hold you, the vision that will guide you, the relationships to all beings and the world that will ground you. Go in peace and in gentle agitation to stir this world to the side of love.
We've been talking this summer about religious naturalism, lessons that we learn from the example of nature. We've been talking about ecosystems, but the one thing we haven't really talked about is how ecosystems start. If you wanted to start an ecosystem, what would you need? That's a real question. If you wanted to start an ecosystem, what would you need? Water, sure. The earth, somebody said something. Plants, the sun, animals of some sort, air. Yeah, there's some essential elements we need for life. Soil. Did you know that when lava cools and makes a rock that doesn't have any soil or any life to it, that can form the hub for an ecosystem? Yeah. Lichen can attach to a stone, and then that lichen is like they call it a pioneer species. and that pioneer species grows and then decays and becomes soil, and then other plants can come along, and pretty soon from this cooled lava, you wind up with a forest. But you have to have that rock first. There has to be something for those pioneer species to attach to. There has to be a stone in the crock pot, right? Same thing with tide pools. If you've heard about tide pools, these are the pools that remain after the tide comes in and then it recedes, and there's a pool of water that remains behind. And there's all kinds of life that happens just in those tide pools in a way that doesn't happen anywhere else. Seaweed, which is a kind of algae, creates food by photosynthesis. And then there are plant eaters like abalone that eat the seaweed, and there are carnivores like sea stars and octopus that eat the clams or the mussels in the tide pool. And all of that depends on the changing level of the ocean water. Without that ocean tide movement, that ecosystem couldn't exist. So maybe it's a physical thing, or maybe it's a process, but there's some hub for every ecosystem that it depends on to be able to exist. Ecosystems don't start from the outside and then find their way toward a center. They start from something. And so the lesson that we might take from that is that our lives and our communities need to start from something. Not to be distracted by all of the things at the periphery, but to have something at the hub that we grow from, that we build from. The stone in the stone soup. Last week, we talked about how we respond to the needs of the world around us and how sometimes we let our anxiety or our urgency lead us to rush to take care of a problem without even thinking about how our values intersect with those issues in the world. We might look and see something that needs to be done, and then later on try to forgive ourselves or make amends for whatever values we trampled on trying to take care of that problem. And so this year, we are going to be looking at a way of defining Unitarian Universalism from a hub of our values. There is, as many of you know, there is new language being proposed for Article 2 of the UUA bylaws that defines our values, defines our principles in a different way, in a more covenantal way than what we currently have. And so this year, especially because there were so many people that were caught by surprise at this year's General Assembly, we're going to spend the year exploring those values more deeply, exploring that covenant more deeply, taking some time to try it on. I have said we're going to try it on the way you would a tailored suit. We're going to make sure that it fits, that we can stretch in it, that, that this is going to actually work for us as a spiritual community. And we can think about it an awful lot, but until we try it on, we're not going to know how it feels to be in this framework. We are not going to get it perfect, and I must admit, we did not get the current principles perfect either. But a covenant is what we promise to one another, just like our congregational covenant that we read at the beginning of this service. It's the thing that we can return to, the hub that we can draw from, the thing that we can realign to when we need to. And I will say that this is not intended to replace anybody's personal theologies or personal values. This is about how we define the broader movement, the broader structure of Unitarian Universalism. If I might just overload our service with object lessons, I might liken it to the Legos that we've been using to build our community. We've built a house out of these Legos, and now we realize we need to build a bridge. And so we could just dismantle the house and toss the Legos all over the place, and we could have Legos here and Legos there, and they could cause a lot of damage when people step on them with bare feet. Or we could put the container out and get all the Legos in a container, and we can have a basket that holds the Legos for us. We can build the bridge out of the same Legos. But if we keep them in a container, then we have a safe place to draw from when we need new pieces for that bridge. This congregation, and I hope a lot of Unitarian Universalist congregations, are the container for this. The pieces, the building blocks don't change. Our values aren't changing. We're expressing them in a different way, and we're seeing if we might build something different. Because sometimes the things that we build, as Alan pointed out with the stone soup, they're not as flavorful as we think they might be if we don't include all of the ingredients. And I loved what Denise said about recognizing ourselves and assuming that there are people who are seeing our communities, who are seeing the play that we're putting on, the presentation of Unitarian Universalism for the first time, and we want people to be able to see themselves in what we do. We don't want people to look at Unitarian Universalism and say, I don't think that's for me. I don't see anybody that looks like me in that. And we want to expand what we're building so that we all still have a place of belonging, so that we all in this room still have a place where we feel like, I've contributed something to this soup, and I also get to have a bowl of the soup. I didn't just bring my celery and hand it off and then have to go eat something else from a fast food place. I get to take part in what we've cooked together. So, our Legos, our stone, our hub, our tide pool, for this year at least, is going to be the values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity, flowing from a center of liberating love. There's a lot to unpack in all of those values, and so we're going to spend time with it. We're not just going to throw them out and say, what do you think? We're going to spend time digging more deeply into each of these in the year ahead and considering what ecosystem we might evolve from that hub. We're inviting the question, what community would we grow if we started with those values? Because there are a lot of ways that we could grow a community. We can describe a lot of things about what an ideal church might look like, and then we could get to work building that, and then go back and say, okay, so what values are we expressing there? Now that we've built this ideal church, what is this actually about? We could do it that way. We could say, what is threatening us in the world? And we could build a safe perimeter around what we're building and say, okay, now that we've got this place that's blocked off and safe, what can we do within those confines? We could do that. There are some communities that start like that. What we're asking is, what would it look like if we start from a hub? If these things are what we collectively care about most deeply as Unitarian Universalists, what would a community look like built on that hub? Because nature does not say, where does seaweed need to have a little place of rest in between the tides and then have a place for some herbivores to come along and eat it, and then have a place for some kind of octopus to crawl along and eat that herbivore? Nature doesn't think about all of those elements and then decide, oh, I need to put a tide pool right here. The tide pool exists, and then the life evolves around that environment. Thriving life. It evolves in a way that it couldn't in any other way, in any other situation, in any other location. So what if we started from the values of justice, equity, transformation, plurality, interdependence, and generosity, centered on liberating love? What kind of community would we co-create? What connections would we build in the wider world? So some of you are probably thinking, we already have that. We already have that hub of values that we have built this community around. And I don't actually disagree with you. I think that's true. Sometimes we probably forget to intentionally go back and check in with those life-affirming values, but they're already a part of who we are, and they're already a part of what we do. So in a sense, this is really just an invitation into a deeper consideration of our covenantal identity. What does it mean to be a little more intentional about building from the hub that we already claim as our own? But holding a bowl of Legos or a basket of Legos These batteries just give me no warning at all. It's a sign. I know somebody out there is saying, oh, you were supposed to stop talking when that happened. I'm close. Holding onto a basket of Legos and not knowing what it is that we're going to actually build can be really stressful and uncomfortable. Saying, we've got these building blocks, and now we all have to decide together what we're going to make and what this bridge is going to look like. Man, can that be scary. So I just want to name that this year is probably going to have some uncomfortable moments in it. And we can be uncomfortable together and explore things with one another and hear one another and express ourselves without being afraid of each other. The goal is that by the end of our exploration, trying on this framework, we'll know what it can inspire us to create together. And we'll be able to say, yes, this works for us, or we'll be able to say, I don't think this will create what we really envision for our community. But even more than that, I hope that in this exploration we begin to see in our personal lives how we can return to the hub of our personal life-affirming values and say, if I'm willing to draw on this stone, whether we're talking about a stone in the crock pot or a stone that is cooled lava that has those pioneer species latching onto it, if I return to that stone over and over again of my life-affirming values, what do I create in my life? Rather than trying to address all of the little issues that crop up and put out all the dumpster fires that we encounter every day, how do I draw on that source in my workplace, in my family, even my extended family that I have a really hard time envisioning a peaceful Thanksgiving dinner with? How do I draw on my values to source that relationship? So I hope that we can learn from nature to build from a hub the ecosystems of our lives in a way that we can thrive and bring greater thriving to the world around us. May we be so bold. I know in your order of service it says we're going to sing the acceptance of gifts again. We're not going to do that. We already did it. We just got overly enthusiastic about our gratitude today. But we are going to sing Break Not the Circle, which is hymn number 323 in the gray hymnal. I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing together. If you have been watching online today and you've enjoyed the service, I invite you to like, share, subscribe, do all of those things so that our ministry in cyberspace can expand. And if you want to be a part of our team that helps that live stream happen, we do need a few more folks in the rotation. So if that's something that you think you would like to try, Sharon would be happy to talk with you and get you on the roster for our live stream team. We also would love to have some Sunday morning online connection facilitators this fall. So if you are one of those people who typically joins us online and you think you might like to host like a Zoom coffee hour for folks that cannot be here physically in person, we would love to hear from you about being in the rotation to host an online gathering, a small group on Sunday mornings for folks that can't be here in person, or who just don't want to be here in person. We do have a lot of exciting things that are happening this fall. We've got a UU History and Theology adult RE course that Alan and I are teaming up on, and that will begin Sunday, September 24th. Registration is now open for that. I think the link is in the newsletter, or you can talk to Alan. Email Alan. Our Journey small group, spiritual development group is going to start on September, some Thursday coming up. There's one spot remaining. If you've been thinking about that and have been sitting on the fence, let me know, because really we're going to cap out at one more person. So that's available. Next Sunday is our water ceremony, and Emma's Revolution will be here to celebrate that with us. You're not as excited as I am about Emma's Revolution? Their music is going to start at 10 o'clock. So please be here at 10 o'clock next Sunday to hear Emma's Revolution as the pre-service music before our water ceremony. And today, Lori Albright and Barbara Hill Newby, wave one more time, Lori and Barbara, are going to have some petitions in the fellowship hall. These are a second attempt at language to create a new redistricting process for Ohio to ensure a more equitable democratic process. So if you have signed a petition in the past months, this is not that. This is a different one. This is a new one. Talk to Lori and Barbara today if you would like to sign that. Also today, if you are curious about our building, there will be a building tour. That sign is what to look for with Carol Gay. Carol will be up here by the piano after the service if you would like a little tour of the building, find out where all of the skeletons are. I might join that tour because I am still finding out where all the skeletons are. May we boldly bring all that we are into the crockpot of this community, that we might create something nourishing and delightful together. Amen, and blessed be.
Please join me in our chalice extinguishing words on the back of your yellow card. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.